What's going on, everybody? My name is Clay, also known as The Creative Pro, and today I wanted to show you how I was able to achieve this stop motion effect in my previous video edit. In order to achieve this stop motion effect, what you're going to need to do is take a multiple series of photos, one after another. Now, when you're shooting a video clip, typically the frame rate that it's played back at is at 24 frames per second. So if we're going to use this 24 frames per second model in our stop motion effect, we're going to need to take 24 photos for 1 second of footage. If you take any less than 24 photos for 1 second of video footage, you're going to lose some of that effect. So keep that in mind while you're creating this effect. When I was taking these photos, I had my ISO at 300. You want to keep your ISO as low as possible because when you bump up your ISO too high, it starts to introduce grain in your image. And for this, you're going to want to keep it as clean as possible. Now for my shutter speed, I always shoot 1 over my focal length. That way it reduces the amount of camera shake during the photo. So I was using my Canon 5D Mark IV that I'm shooting with right now, and I had my 70 to 200 millimeter lens on my camera. I then zoomed in to 100 millimeters, so for that I chose 1 over 100 for my shutter speed. If I were to zoom into 200, I would have chose 1 over 200. So just keep in mind when you're doing this, you're going to want to be 1 over your focal length. And this can be done with a mirrorless camera. You're just going to want to keep in mind what your camera's crop is. So for my Canon M5, my mirrorless camera, the crop factor is times 1.6. So any lens I put on there, that will be multiplied by 1.6. So if I was zoomed into 100, instead of my shutter speed being 1 over 100, it would then be 1 over 160. Just keep in mind if you're using a mirrorless camera that you'll want to incorporate that crop factor. And for my aperture, my 70 to 200 millimeter lens goes to 2.8, but I wanted to make sure that I got everything in focus, so I bumped it up to f4. And I found when I do shoot at f2.8 rather than f4, that it doesn't cause as much as a flicker effect. So keep in mind, if you're going to do this, I would suggest shooting at the lowest aperture your camera can go. So if that's 1.4, 1.8, 2.8, choose that to reduce the amount of flicker that you'll get in between each photo you take. Now, while you're creating this effect, the best thing to have is a tripod, or at least your camera is stabilized throughout the whole process. You don't want the camera to move at all, because if the camera moves at all during this process, you're really going to see the jump in between each photo, which will end up throwing off the effect. So what I used was my Manfrotto tripod to ensure that my camera was stabilized during this process. And another thing you're going to want to keep in mind is having a good source of lighting for this effect. What I did is used a 3-way lighting system. So I had my aperture 120D as the main key light, and I bumped up the power pretty high. I believe I was around 80%. And above the products I was shooting, I had an IKEA, I believe it's called a Regolith light, and I used that in combination with a sheet to make sure that it was wrapped around the light and was drawing the light directly down on the image that I was trying to highlight. And to the left side of my aperture 120D, I just had an LED light that had an umbrella. I've had this laying around for years now, so I just used it to fill in a little bit of the side light because of the power of my 120D. Now, you don't need to use all this fancy lighting, but I would suggest getting the most light you can because it's going to highlight the image a lot more, and therefore you don't need to bump up your ISO as high to overcompensate for not having as much lighting. So I would check out the IKEA Regolith light. I got that whole setup for about $30, and it's really come in clutch for a lot of projects I have done in the past. And another thing you're going to want to think about while creating GIFs is having a remote shutter or a wireless shutter. So whether your camera shutter plugs into the camera and you're holding it and snapping the shots as you go, or connecting your phone and using the wireless shutter like I did myself. That way I didn't have to press the camera down, because every time you press it, there'll be a slight shake in the photo. Worst case scenario, say you don't have any wireless shutter or a remote shutter, what you can do is set your camera to a timer, maybe like a 2 to 5 second delay. That way when you press the shutter, the camera should stop shaking a little bit and be still by the time it takes the image. So the less bounce you have in between each photo, the more consistent the look is going to be throughout the footage. So that's all the camera gear and settings you need to think about. Let's talk about how I actually put it together. What I did was make sure that I made slow, subtle movements. That way I can get enough photos to work with. And I like taking more photos. That way I can cut the footage down rather than taking not enough photos and wishing I had more to work with in post-production. What I found that helped a little bit too is for certain moves is using a measuring tape. That way the move of the object in between each shot is more precise and accurate, and it keeps a consistent look throughout the images. And this is where you get creative. You want to come up with interesting ways to bring your subject into the frame, maybe have the subject spin around. So this is where you want to put on your creative cap and really just think outside of the box. And one thing I did notice, and I think you should keep in mind if you're using a backdrop like I did, is when I was taking the first few photos and moving the banana into the frame, I was bumping the backdrop each time I was moving the banana. So sometimes the backdrop would be moving while I was taking the photo. And in the final GIF, you can kind of see the curtain moving a little bit. So therefore I had to crop in a little bit more on the subject. That way you couldn't see the background as much. So just keep in mind, if you're using a backdrop that is fabric like the one I was using, try not to bump into it and make sure if you do that the backdrop has stopped moving. That way you won't see it in the final image. And what's great about using stop motion is, depending on your camera and if you shoot raw, you're gonna get a higher quality image than if you were to shoot in 1080p or 4K, which gives you the ability to crop into your image without losing quality at all. So that's another reason why I do like stop motion, because I can get a higher quality image without having to shoot in 4K. So now I've walked you through how to shoot the images. Why don't we take the memory card and put it on the computer, and I'll show you how I put this together inside of Final Cut Pro. So I imported all the footage I have on my memory card into Final Cut Pro, and the clips all ended up here. So as you can see, for example, the banana footage is here, and as I scroll down, these are all the photos that I took. Here's some other photos. So you can see all of the footage has been imported inside of Final Cut Pro. So now what you're going to want to do is select the clips that you want to use to create the stop motion effect. So let's say we were to work on this banana clip. What you're going to want to do is come to the first shot, select the whole clip, and I'm going to hold Shift and come down until I see the last shot. So right here. So now it has selected all the clips in yellow that I want to use to create the stop motion effect. And from here, I'm just going to press the letter E, and you can see we have all of the clips right here imported into the timeline. Now if I just play it back like this, each clip individually plays for 10 seconds. So to make it look like it's video footage, what we're going to want to do is select all of the clips and change this duration. I like to do 1/10 of a second, so I'm just putting 10 and then hitting enter. And as you can see, it's really shortened up all those clips. And as you can see here, we have some black bars on the side. So to make sure your footage fills up the whole frame, what you're going to want to do is select all the clips again, come down to spatial conform, and choose fill. Now it fills up the whole screen. And then from here, with all the clips selected, we're going to right click and choose new compound clip, and we'll just hit OK. And now with this compound clip, we can speed it up to make this effect happen faster. So I'm gonna go ×2, and now the clip is 35 seconds long. So with this, you can just adjust the compound clip if you want it faster, slower, depends on what you're going for. But what I'll do is go back to the actual promo footage I put together, and here's that banana clip in the full video edit that I made, and I have it at 800 speed. And this clip is a total of about 2 seconds long. So I play it back here, there it is. So this process remains the same for any stop motion effect you want to put together. For this clip, I went through and added all of the photos that I had of the banana chocolate chip muffins coming onto the top of the Lazy Susan here. And as you can see, I play that back. Now on this clip, you can see there's a little bit of handheld motion on it. What I did was inside this compound clip, on top of an adjustment layer, I added the handheld effect and just adjusted the shakiness and distance to where I liked it. And then inside here, I have all of those individual clips that created the whole stop motion effect. Now for this clip, I didn't actually get a stop motion effect of it. I just had the zucchini rolling on the table, and then all I did was flipped at a mirror effect, so it was mirrored on the top and bottom, and that way it just enhanced it a little bit rather than just having the zucchini rolling from left to right out of the screen. And then the zucchini being chopped up, all I did was spin the zucchini around and cut it each time I spun it, and that created this effect here. And if I go inside, you can see all those individual shots that I just brought to 1/10 of a second. All I did on this effect here was add a Ken Burns effect, so as it's playing, it just zooming back into the middle. And then this, I just had some chocolate chips that I dropped onto the table, and I did the same mirror effect. I couldn't get this as a stop motion, unfortunately, so I just did a video clip, mirrored it here to make it look a little bit more interesting. And now this was one of the most difficult shots I had to get, because what I had to work with was these shots here. So each shot I had 2 glasses on the side, and I had it taped down, and that way I just was holding the other end and rotating this muffin and taking a shot each time I moved the muffin. But what I had to do was get rid of the sides here, so you don't see that there's a skewer and these cups with the tape and everything. So I had to take each one of these individual shots and bring it into Photoshop and mask out all of the skewer in the cups, and then I had to bring those images back into Final Cut Pro here. And as you can see, it's just dark behind where I masked out the background. And as I play this back, you can see the muffin rotating. So alone it was going slow, so that's why I added a speed up effect to it. So it plays back like this. And all I did was copy this muffin, and when the beat dropped, I added another muffin to the shot. So this is the same shot, I just reversed it, and I did the same thing on the left side. So now when it plays back in the edit, it looks like that. And as the background, so you don't see the black area, what I did was have a clean shot. So I just took an image of the backdrop itself. So if I don't have this here, you can see that was just the gray backdrop I had. And all I did was add a keyframe so it moves from the left to the right as the footage plays by. So it gives it a little bit more movement in the final effect. So when I play them both together, there's what you get. So that's all I have for everyone today. I hope you understand how to create your own stop motion and can start using this in your upcoming edits. I feel like stop motion hasn't been done very often, so if you incorporate this in your content on social media platforms, it's really going to stand out from the crowd and be able to capture people's attention. If there's anything else you'd like to know about camera gear, shooting, editing, anything creative, let me know in the comments down below, and I would love to bring another tutorial to everybody. Until next time, keep creating.